Welcome to Overwatch. This time we're going to be doing something a little bit different, but rather a favourite topic of mine. While I enjoy following the competitive and top-end scene of any game, I'm one of the few competitive-minded people that also rather enjoys the story of a game and the setting it's built in. I'm the kind of nerd that knows the backstory of all the characters in League of Legends and such, no matter how terribly written it might be. On top of this, I rather like lore speculation. Some of this might have come across in the various breakdowns I did of the animations. I like seeing the world getting established, and I like to pick up on things as the world becomes more fleshed out and developed. As a setting, the Overwatch world certainly caught my interest. The comic book sci-fi utopia setting is a rather neat one and can have some decent story threads in the right hands. And while Metzen is not the most trusted of authors, too much corruption and fallen heroes for everyone's personal taste, I think that with a relatively clean slate of Overwatch, good things can happen. So on this episode of Lorewatch, totally original name, not used by absolutely everyone, I'll try and come up with a better one at some point soon, let's clear up the biggest misconception about the story. The relationship between the lore, stories and events of the game itself. Namely the misconception that gameplay, the core gameplay of a 6 vs 6 shooter, in any way ties to the story. Simply put, it doesn't. The only game I've seen try to relate the story directly into a game like this is League of Legends, where they set up the contrivance of the Institute of War because, quote, real war is too magically dangerous and too volatile, so disputes were instead solved in 5 vs 5 battles. Except the system falls apart logically and narratively in a matter of moments. It has so many holes in it it's unreal, and limits future character options because everyone has to answer to the Institute of War. They since ditched that system in favour of a more detached lore similar to what Overwatch runs. It informs the characters, it informs the world and builds interesting interactions, but isn't actually tied to the gameplay. There's no chance, for example, that Reaper and Tracer could wait patiently for an entire minute to go and attack Soldier 76 and Widowmaker, who also waited very patiently for everyone to set up on Watchpoint Gibraltar, then do it again a few minutes later swapping sides. There's no point in trying to make that work. I see a lot of people, after having this point explained to them, wonder what the point of lore is then. Why bother building backstories and weaving tales if you aren't bringing it into the game? The answer comes in several parts. First, most importantly, it's fun. Storytelling, character backgrounds and how they work with and against each other just makes everything richer and more interesting. Having Widowmaker and Tracer banter back and forth about an event that you can go look up is really damn cool, or Mercy and Soldier 76 remembering old times. It also makes characters more likeable, or dislikable, and there's more avenues to give them flavour and personality rather than Soldier 76 just being shooty gunman and Widowmaker being sniper girl. Not to mention, well, Blizzard do have the resources to do this. The cinematics alone might be well worth their budget in terms of marketing. I have friends that don't play Overwatch but watched all of them and firmly know about the game because of them, for example. It's not like the time and money being spent on writers and animators is taking things away from the core game. It's also, hopefully, not like the lore will ever affect game balance. I'm going to refer to League even more simply because this is one of the very few times I've ever seen something like this occur. They ran an event not long ago where one of the characters was killed in the story, and they disabled the use of that character in-game for a few days. A few people, well, a lot of people were very, very upset by this. Afterwards the character came back with new lore, new mechanics and a redesign after their return, but I hope that Blizzard never considered doing anything exactly like that. For example, if the plot moves forward and characters are injured or similar, that really shouldn't be reflected in-game. Of course, I did just touch on something I consider the big issue with a game lore separation. How and when does the plot move forward? Luckily, with Overwatch, there's a wealth of stuff to cover before the game even is set. We have the older generation of heroes to learn a huge number of things about before the new generation even sweeps in. But at some point, we're going to want to see if the old heroes are recruiting the new ones, if Pharah joins Overwatch, for example, if Widowmaker ever gets a hold of the Doomfist, or does Reaper actually win on a mission to kill someone at some point. Either way, we've gone over the disconnect. There is no overlap between in-game and story aside from setting and characterization. Tracer in a CGI short can blink 30 times in a row if she wants, because it doesn't exactly have to relate to the in-game mechanics. That's great, it means they can make characters do cool and interesting things without having to worry about what it could mean in-game. So let's get everyone up to speed. Overwatch is set in the near future. As far as I know, there's no concrete dates actually outlined, and the story really does actually begin 30 years prior to when the game is set. A global corporation called Omnic began mass production of a new series of self-improving robots, building them from large factories known as Omniums. Running these Omnic machines, it seems they used a series of so-called God programs, which predictably went full Skynet or Shodan or, well, pick any AI system you want, and decided to wipe out humanity. So begins the first Omnic Crisis. Independently, nations suddenly had to be fighting off a seemingly endless tide of efficient killer robots that were constantly getting better and better at killing and building themselves in number. Individually, nations struggled to take the strain, and as such, an international task force was created by the United Nations, Overwatch, to go counter the threat. Light on regulation, high on mobility and funding, Overwatch is to Omnics as XCOM is to Aliens. Recruiting some of the best in the world and making use of advances globally, Overwatch went around the globe disabling Omniums and averting crises. The core members were Strike Commander Gabriel Reyes, Jack Morrison, Torbjorn Lindholm, Reinhard Wilhelm and Anna Amari. Considered a major factor in winning the war in the first Omnic Crisis, Overwatch remained operational after the war, becoming an international peacekeeping organization. Jack Morrison was then made leader or strike commander due to his positive impact on the team, while Gabriel Reyes went ahead and moved on to Blackwatch, the covert ops side of Overwatch. Overwatch itself expanded into scientific endeavor alongside peacekeeping, recruiting the best and brightest, but it had a growing black spot. Hints of corruption and criminal activity started to dot the organization over its 2-decade operating period. Public distrust of Overwatch steadily grew and hit boiling point when Blackwatch was exposed to the world. Blackwatch, operating with limited moral compass, shall we say, meant that the United Nations could not allow the continued operation of Overwatch, shutting it down and instituting the Petrus Act, effectively making all future operations of Overwatch illegal. At this time, it appears that Gabriel Reyes attempted a coup against Jack Morrison, resulting in the quote-unquote death of both and destruction of Overwatch's Swiss headquarters. 10 years then followed relatively quietly, although Overwatch agents dispersed and many did remain active in the shadows. In those 10 years, the Omnic threat never truly left, however, with a reactivated Omnium in Siberia prompting the start of the so-called Second Omnic Crisis. It was there that Zarya made her name, by the way, as well as continued threats such as the monstrously huge Omnic Titan that threatened the Far East in Asia, Korea and Japan coming under repeated attack, and Mecha being formed as a response. Winston, stuck in Watchpoint Gibraltar mostly, it seems, issued a full recall of Overwatch agents after seeing continued crises around the world that he felt Overwatch could resolve. The public became aware of this recall after the museum heist, the very first cutscene. In short, in the current time, it feels like all Overwatch agents are considered criminal or vigilante, although many have considerable goodwill built up towards them. The current major threats include dormant god programs and the Omniums themselves, as well as Talon, a terrorist organization which so far has no clear goal outlined. Talon, of course, is rather near and dear to my heart. Hopefully that catches everyone up on where we are at right now, because next time we'll start talking specifics. We'll talk fully on my personal favourite, Widowmaker's story. Doodles.